Welcome back to Pace Immigration, paceimmigration.com, talking with immigration lawyer Michael O'Rourke. Michael, good to see you.
Great to see you, Sean. How's it going?
Going very well. We've got an update for people who have been asking for one. We're recording this just before the new year. We've got the update: foreign buyers banned from purchasing real estate in Canada. The story is getting a lot of play right now in the press. I have this weird feeling that it kind of flew under the radar until now, and now the moment is upon us. I've got the actual name for it, what the government is calling it, which is the Prohibition on the Purchase of Residential Property by Non-Canadians Act. Michael, what is this act for?
So this act is ostensibly to provide better housing or more housing for Canadian buyers. So the emphasis on this is who is a Canadian and who is a non-Canadian. That's what this comes down to. And we'll get into that shortly, but when we first made this video, the definition of non-Canadians really left out some very important categories, such as temporary foreign workers, students, any temporary residents who are in Canada. So there was a big question mark as to whether this would apply broadly or if they would try to make accommodations for people who are already here.
Right. We'll get into that for sure. That's part of this update. We've got here on this first slide that it affects non-Canadians who directly or indirectly want to buy residential property in Canada, and it's going to be in force, the government says, for the next 2 years. Talk about what kind of property when we get to this residential stuff.
Sure. So it is residential property. It's where you make your primary home. So any detached house, semi-detached house, condominium units, co-ops, anything like that. It does not apply to commercial buildings. It is aimed at the typical first investment that families will make here.
Right. So let's get down into the other parts about the purchasing. It includes purchases made through legal corporations, trusts, or other legal entities. It also, there's an interesting highlight here: non-Canadians can still be liable under the contract of purchase and sale prior to January 1st, 2023. So this does not throw those things out the window.
Exactly.
Okay. Let's move into the actual exemptions. That's what people were asking for on the YouTube channel with the comments. Does this apply to me if I'm X? And we're going to get into that. So start with, it seems natural, Canadian citizens are exempt from this.
Yes, thankfully. So even in Toronto, there's still a hope of buying a house if you're a Canadian citizen.
Right.
It also exempts permanent residents, and it exempts Canadian or federal or provincial companies that are controlled by Canadian citizens. So if you have, say, an Ontario corporation that is owned and controlled by all foreign people, non-Canadians, then that company would not be able to buy residential property under this new act.
Right. We've got, this was a big one too. We got a lot of questions about this. International students.
Yes. So the students are an interesting category because when I was a student, I could never even think about buying a house.
Yeah.
But quite a few do here. They have imposed some stringent requirements for students, but there is still a hope if you're a student and you want to buy a property in Canada that's residential. For instance, you have to have filed income tax returns, and you have to have spent a certain amount of days per year in the preceding few years before you are eligible to buy a house. They have also put a dollar value cap of $500,000. So most residential properties in, say, the Greater Toronto area or Vancouver are going to be well over this amount.
I was going to say that 500,000 makes it almost impossible, not necessarily impossible, but that number is there obviously for a reason, which is to make it maybe more difficult. And that number too, which I found kind of interesting, students have to be present in Canada for 244 days each year for the 5 years prior to buying a property. What do you make of these numbers that they're putting down? It seems onerous.
It does, especially if you come to Canada's for, say, a bachelor degree program. those are usually 3 to 4 years, depending on the program and depending on the university or college.
Right.
So to have spent 5 years in Canada, they might be looking for, say, somebody who's in graduate level programs. But to have that plus the cap on value, I don't know if many people will actually qualify as students.
Right. Okay, let's move on. We have more exemptions. Diplomats and consular staff.
Yes, so diplomats, consular staff, they are completely exempt. There's no requirement that they have spent any particular amount of time in Canada, unlike students or foreign workers who have temporary residence status.
Now, this was the one that you mentioned to me. You said, oh, good. I'm glad to see they actually highlighted foreign workers. We've got here foreign nationals with temporary resident status.
Yes, so to qualify for this, you have to have a work permit or other authorization to work in Canada. You have to have worked full time in Canada for at least 3 years within the past 4 years. And you have to have filed Canadian income tax returns for the last 3 or 4 years. So they also put an additional requirement on temporary foreign workers. This will not allow them to buy more than one house. So if they've purchased a property already, then that's the only one that they get under this act.
All right. So those are the main updates that we found. Was the foreign workers update, the student update, and I'm not sure if we saw these exact figures on the penalties, but here's what can happen to people if they go against the act, and talk about that.
Yes, so the penalties are actually quite broad. So anyone who knowingly helps somebody overcome this ban on foreign purchasers can be fined up to $10,000. That's very broad. So I think it is going to create much more of a due diligence requirement on behalf of realtors, on perhaps lawyers even, who are called in to assist or hired to assist with a purchase. They're going to have to be sure that the clients that they have taken on actually are legal to purchase under this Prohibition Act.
Yeah, I mean, does it come down to what happens if I hang up a sign at the student union lobby that's advertising housing, or so? Am I helping to breach the ban? I mean, you're right. It is quite broad. I mean, if you drive someone around looking at properties, are you helping them to breach the ban?
Theoretically, yes. However, is the Crown going to prosecute you for
not.
doing that? Hopefully not.
Yeah.
I have people to refer you to in case they do. But
I have to guess then this is basically more about this is aimed at the person that's actually doing it, or perhaps someone in real estate.
Yes. I think that's where, if there is going to be any sense of enforcing this against people who aid and abet the purchase of real estate by a non-Canadian, that they would first look at the real estate industry.
Right. I wanted to get your thoughts on this. This one, I don't know how I feel about it, right? Courts have the power to order that the property be sold. I mean, in practice, that sounds, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
That's interesting too. Again, giving the courts the power to do so doesn't mean that any particular court will do so. I think it is more of a scare tactic than an actual remedy, but it is possible that it could happen. We haven't. This is all theoretical. We haven't seen any sort of prosecutions under this new act. We don't know how stringently it's going to be enforced, but the potential penalties are swinging, and I think the overall thrust of this is that they just want to calm the real estate market. They want to look like they're doing something more than maybe they're actually doing. But at least the upside of this is that now students and temporary residents are better defined. We can help them have the hope of buying property if they can meet the requirements in the act.
Okay, thanks a lot for this, Michael. We'll keep an eye on it. I have a feeling this thing might morph and change as time goes on, and we'll provide updates as they come up.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sean. Take care.